Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Lifeline for Daily Living. Yes, this is the place where you can find the answers to your mental health, relationship, and family questions. I'm your host, Jim Hewitt. Glad you've tuned in today. I think you're going to find today's topic very interesting, so I hope you'll stay tuned because we'll be right back. All right. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Lifeline for Daily Living. So glad that you've decided to join me today. I want to talk about something that I talk about with couples every single day. Rarely does a day go by, rarely does a week go by that couples come into my office dealing with this issue. Now, this particular issue we're going to talk about today involves a lot of things. You know, it could be anything from finances to who does the dishes, who does the chores around the house, where are we going to eat, what, you know, it involves a lot of things. What am I talking about? I'm talking about something that every couple, whether you're married 1 year, 10 years, 50 years, or whether you're engaged or whether you're just dating, if you are involved in another relationship, you have experienced this somewhere along the line, and I'm talking about conflict. Very few couples like to just openly admit that they have conflict, but it's common in all relationships. It's common in all marriages. Think about it for a second. You take two people who come from two different backgrounds, two different households, two different raising experiences, two different maybe value systems, two different viewpoints, two different personalities, and you put them together in the same home, yeah, you're going to have conflict. Somewhere along the line, you're going to have conflict. Now, the question isn't really if you're going to have conflict. Really, the question is, when are you going to have conflict? And more importantly, how are you going to deal with the conflict once it does come up? And again, it can be from the simplest things to the most complicated things. What are you going to do when conflict arises? And that's what I want to do today. I want to talk to you about how to resolve conflict. How can you do that? I get this question every single day. How can we resolve our conflict? We seem to be arguing back and forth, and we never really seem to solve the issue, solve the conflict. You know, we both kind of go to our separate corners, and nothing ever gets resolved. Well, if you will follow these steps that I'm going to outline today, if you will follow these steps, you'll become closer. You'll get closer to resolving conflict. Now, I want to say at the outset, this isn't easy. It's not going to be easy. You're going to think you're right. The other person's going to think they're right. The other person's going to think their point of view is right. Your point of view is right. And so somewhere you have to figure out how to navigate these waters of conflict. So I want to give you some steps today on how to do that. Number one, resolving conflict, I think, requires knowing and accepting and adjusting to each other's differences. Listen, I don't have to tell you that the person you're living with or the person you're in a relationship with is different than you, right? Can you imagine how boring it would be if we were all the same? That would just be absolutely boring. One of the reasons that we have conflict in marriage is because opposites do attract. They do attract. Your spouse adds variety to the relationship. It would be dull and dreary if they were exactly like you. Now listen, I know you wish that they were exactly like you, but really, I don't think so. It's important, I think, to understand what the differences are and then to accept and adjust to them. Oftentimes what happens in conflict is that I expect you to think like me. And I expect you to think like me. You expect me to think like you. Well, think about it. We're two different people. It's kind of like the old adage, if you have 5 people standing on a street corner and they all saw the same accident, they're going to give different accounts of what they saw. The same accident, everybody's going to give a different account because of their perspective. Now, these differences started all the way back with Adam and Eve. God created us differently. Females think differently than males, and males think differently than females. And what happens is we often want to mold that other person into the way we want them to be, and that's just not going to happen. If it does happen, it's going to be uncomfortable for both of you. I believe God gave you your spouse in a way that enhances you, brings in a different perspective if you'll accept that you're just different. That doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can actually be a real good thing, because if I have a decision to make and I'm not sure about that decision, I'm not sure what direction to go, then my wife can give me input and bring into, and that has happened a lot over the years that we've been married. She brings in a different perspective than what I have. So one way to resolve conflicts it requires you to know, accept, and adjust to the differences that the two of you have. Number 2, I think to resolve conflict requires defeating selfishness. Oh, let me stop there for just a second. Defeating selfishness. Now, you might be saying, in your car or in your home or at your computer or watching your phone, wherever you're watching this, I'm not selfish. I'm not selfish at all. I just want the things that I want. Oh, really? Yeah. Now, look, let's just start right there. Let's admit that we all have a selfish bent to us. All of our differences are magnified in our marriage because they feed what is undoubtedly the biggest source of conflict, and that is our selfish nature. I want what I want. I want it now. I want it the way I want it. Now, when you stop thinking about it, those of you who have children, think about your children when they're like a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years old. They want what they want, right? They want what they want when they want it, and they want it yesterday. Okay? We are the same way. We're just all bent toward that. I love watching these videos of these babies on Facebook. And once in a while that comes through on my feed, and I love to watch. One of them taking a toy or taking a pacifier from the other one. Doesn't belong to them, but they're taking it, and then there's a squabble that takes place. Well, that's what happens. It's in our nature to be that way. So maintaining harmony in a marriage has been, you take it all the way back to Adam and Eve, it's been that way since the very beginning. And so we have to learn to be other-oriented. And one of the reasons why we're not, I believe, one of the reasons why we're not is because we're so afraid that our needs are not going to get met. I'm not going to get what I want. Well, let me burst a bubble for you. Even though most of you who are watching are adults, have you always gotten what you want when you want it? Well, the obvious answer is no. None of us get what we want when we want it. None of us do. None of us get that all of the time. So you take 2 people at the beginning of their marriage, and they're trying to work this thing out, and they're trying to be, come to this oneness, but God intended them to be different. And so we have to overcome. It's called agape love. It's other-oriented. And so in order to resolve conflicts, we need to be other-oriented, not so self-centered and selfish about what we want. I say this often to couples. Once we forget about we and start focusing on me, that's the beginning of conflict right there. Think of that equation. Once we forget about we and start focusing on me, there's going to be conflict every single time. So let's just accept the fact that we're all, and admit it, that we're all self-centered, that we all want our way, And that's the principal reason why there's conflict in a relationship. I want what I want, when I want it, and I want it now. Okay? I think about that TV commercial advertising a certain cell phone plan or certain loan. I want a certain loan, and I want my money. It's my money, and I want it now. Well, I get the intent of the commercial, but really, when you think about it, that's a lot of what we do, right? I want what I want, and I want it now. And so, in order to resolve conflict, it means doing away with, defeating selfishness. Number 3, resolving conflict involves, and this is going to sound maybe a little odd, it also involves pursuing that other person. Now, that doesn't mean following them around like a little puppy dog. No. Listen to what Paul says. Paul says in Romans chapter 12, verse 18, he says, "If at all possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with each other." Live peaceably with each other. Now, I need to pursue, in my relationship, I need to pursue peace. I need not wait for that other person. I need to pursue them. And so it means that taking the initiative to resolve the difficulty. What is it that it's interesting that when I have couples come into the office and they start talking about the conflict they have, I will ask each of them, okay, what is it that you're contributing to this conflict? And they look at me like, well, why would you ask me that question? I don't contribute. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. What is it that you contribute to the conflict? And so it involves taking the initiative, pursuing that other person. And so, keep your relationship current. Don't let stuff pile up, because then you're going to explode, and you're going to have a year's worth of stuff. No, you need to pursue that other person. If you feel like they've wronged you, if they've done something to hurt your feelings, you need to pursue that. Now, if you don't care about the relationship, okay, then don't pursue them. But if you care about the relationship, then it's up to you. Don't wait on them. You pursue them. As much as is in all of you, Paul says, live peaceably with each other. So, resolving conflict requires pursuing that other person. I want to make this right. I want to preserve our relationship. I don't want our relationship to end. I don't want there to be this chasm between the two of us. I want to resolve this, and I have to be other oriented in order to do that. Step number 4, and this is a big one now. Resolving conflict involves loving confrontation. Notice I stress the word loving. Loving confrontation. Now, confrontation in itself is not necessarily a bad thing. It can become a bad thing real quick, but it's not a bad thing. Confrontation says, here's my stance, there's your stance. Now, how can we come together? You've done something to hurt me. You've said something to hurt me. You've not done something. You've not said something. And so I want to confront. Now, watch this. Some of the things to think about before you confront someone else, lovingly confront, speak the truth in love, the Bible says. Before you do that, you need to check your motivation. Check your motivation. Is your motivation, I'm going to make them pay? Then I'm just going to give them both barrels. Boom! I'm going to give them both barrels, and I'm just going to really let them have it. Check your motivation. Is it you want to share your feelings, your thoughts, so you can get past this conflict and preserve the relationship, or you just want to let them let them have it? Okay. Check your motivation. Second of all, check your attitude. Check your attitude. Remember, this is loving confrontation. The biblical principle here is speak the truth in love. So, you have done this. Maybe they're aware, maybe they're not aware, but you have done this, you have said this, and I'm going to confront the issue. So I need to check my motivation. I need to check my attitude. I also need to check to see is what's happening here because of external pressures? Is there other things going on in the person's life that I may or may not be aware of? Maybe there's something else going on that maybe they're just not feeling good. Maybe they're wrestling with some thoughts and feelings inside that I'm not aware of. And so, check out what may be going on with them. And I think also focus on the issue, not on the person's character. Man, oftentimes whenever we're talking about conflict and trying to settle an argument or disagreement, we often start attacking the person's character. Well, you always do this, and you do this intentionally, and you're such an unkind, uncaring person. Boom. No, that's not going to solve anything. Address the issue. Don't attack the person's character. Because see, think about it with yourself. If somebody is attacking your character, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to defend yourself. Whoa, no, that's not fair. I didn't think that. I didn't mean that. I didn't intend for that to happen. So focus on the issue and not on attacking the person's character. I think if you do that, man, you can have loving confrontation. Anytime you use "you always," global kind of words, you always, never, all of those kinds of words, you're attacking their character. Okay? Talk about how you feel about what's happened, and talk about the issue at hand, not the ton of issues that may have been in the past. Okay? Don't bring that stuff into the present confrontation or the present issue. Talk about what's going on right now. Oh, well, this reminds me, of what you did 5 years ago. That's not going to do. What can I do about something 5 years ago? I can't do anything. So let's talk about the issue that is at hand. Okay, so address the issue at hand and don't attack the person's character. Number 5, and this is a big one, and I talked about this a little bit in a previous podcast, and that is resolving conflicts requires forgiveness. It requires forgiveness. Now, let me talk about forgiveness a little bit. Forgiveness is giving up the right to do to you what you have done to me. Giving up the right to do to you what you have done to me. Forgiveness is letting you go. It's letting you up off the mat. It's not about me. It's about me letting you up off the mat. The thing about it, the other person's just kind of going along, and they're living their life, and they're doing their thing. You're the one that's being eaten up by unforgiveness. So listen. Forgiveness is giving up the right to do to you. Man, I could hurt you back. I could say mean things. I could do mean things. I have every right to do that, but I give that up. See, that's preserving the relationship. Forgiveness is giving up the right to do to you what you've done to me. And also, listen now, forgiveness is a process. It's not an event. We often think of forgiveness as an event. So first of all, remember, forgiveness is giving up the right to do to you what you've done to me. Second, it's a process. It's not an event. It's a process. You are in the process of forgiving someone. Now, don't use that as an excuse to hold that over the other person. No, I'm in the process. I'm trying to figure all of this out, because what you said, what you did, what you didn't say, what you didn't do, whatever the case may be, has really hurt. And so it's giving up the right to do to you what you've done to me. It's a process. And it's also letting the person up off the mat. And once you've done that, you give up the right then to ever bring that issue into a future conflict. So you better be sure that you've genuinely forgiven them. Forgiveness that doesn't depend on their actions. See that? It doesn't depend on their actions. It depends solely on you. Think about this. Jesus was hanging on the cross, and he's bleeding, and the thorns on his head, and the nails in his feet and hands. They were down at the foot of the cross. They were making fun of him, jeering him, taunting him to come down off the cross if he really was the Son of God. And Jesus looked at all of that going on, and here's what he said: "Father, forgive them, because they don't even know what they're doing. Wow. We talk as believers, we talk a lot about wanting to be like Jesus. We want to walk like Jesus. Really? Forgiveness is giving up the right to do to you what you have done to me. Father, forgive them because they don't even know what they're doing. Resolving conflicts requires forgiveness. It's a process. You want to get there, but it's not, and I think a third thing I want to mention here is that forgiveness does not condone what the other person did. There's no such thing as forgive and forget. It doesn't condone what they did. You're just wanting to preserve the relationship and then move on. Now, in some instances, forgiveness also means, I'm going to let you go. You've done this repeatedly. You've repeatedly hurt me. You've repeatedly done these things, and you've asked for forgiveness over and over and over again, only to repeat the same thing. Well, if there's a repetitive pattern, the person's really not asking for forgiveness then, are they? They're just wanting to make it easy. So you need to think about that. Forgiveness doesn't condone what they did. It just means that I want to move past these thoughts and feelings. And finally, number 6, resolving conflict, I think it requires returning a blessing for an insult. Now that's hard. See, often when we're in conflict with someone, we want to return things in kind, right? You said this, and I'm going to say that. Well, you said this, well, I'm going to say that. We do all those kind of things, and it doesn't get us anywhere. It just gets us mired down deeper in the mud. So what you can do is, this is a biblical principle now, and that is you don't return insult for insult. You return a blessing for an insult. You really want to be like Jesus? You want to walk and talk and minister like Jesus? Okay, here's the thing. Return blessing for insult. That's a hard thing to do. Because everything within us, all of our human nature screams out, I want retribution. I want payback. I want to give them exactly what I got. See that? We live in a culture that operates that way. I'm going to get you back. I'm going to get even. No, return a blessing for an insult. If you want to preserve if you don't want to preserve the relationship, okay, just go your separate ways. But if you want to preserve the relationship, return a blessing for an insult. And once you begin to practice that, it may take you a while to get there, but once you begin to practice that, you're going to find that the relationship is going to, now returning a blessing for an insult doesn't mean that you put up with the stuff, okay? Now, if it's a repetitive pattern, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about it doesn't mean that you become a doormat. Doesn't mean that you let the person walk all over you. Doesn't mean that you deny your own feelings about the hurt. Doesn't mean any of that. It just means I'm not going to get on the same level as that other person and do and say what they have done and said. Okay? So now let me kind of wrap all this up. I've given you a lot of information, given you 6 steps on how to resolve conflict. So think about this. Whenever 2 people enter into a relationship, there is inevitably going to be conflict. If I ever engage a couple that says, well, we never argue, we never fight, two things are possible here. Number 1, they're either lying, or number 2, they don't live together. You take 2 people and you put them together in the same house, in the same relationship, there's inevitably going to be conflict. So it's not a matter of if a conflict is going to occur, but when it does occur, how will you respond? And I've given you 6 steps to resolving conflict. Winning or losing arguments is not the objective here. It's not. It's not win or lose, but it's preserving the relationship. That's the important thing. What can I do to preserve the relationship? And I think if you'll take the steps that I've outlined today and you'll follow those and you'll begin to work on those, and maybe working on 1 or 2, not all 6 of them at a time, but 1 or 2, really working on that, pull something out. Maybe what I'd like for you to do today is after you finish this podcast is sit down and just write one of those steps out and work on that for the next few weeks. Just work on that one step for the next few weeks. And once you've got that mastered, then go to the next, and go to the next, and go to the next. And finally, you will come to a point where whenever there's a conflict, these 6 steps you'll just automatically, they'll go into motion for you, and you'll seek to preserve that wonderful relationship that you've entered into. God wants us to live at peace with one another. He wants marriages to be at peace. He wants relationships to be at peace. He wants us to be a peaceful people as we enter into relationship one with another. How about you? Are you in conflict? Probably so. If not, hang on, you will be. Probably by the end of this week, you'll be in conflict somewhere along the line. What are you going to do when that conflict arises? If you do these 6 steps, you're going to come closer to resolving conflict and preserving a wonderful, healthy relationship. Well, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Lifeline for Daily Living. If something I've said today has stirred some interest in you and you want to talk about it, there's 3 ways that you can contact me. Number 1 is through my phone, 573-732-4575. Again, 573-732-4575. You can also email me. My email address is lifelineonline@hotmail.com, lifelineonline@hotmail.com. A third way is if you're watching on Facebook or if you're watching on YouTube, you can private message me, and you can ask a question, you can make an appointment. I want to sit down with you and help you to resolve the conflicts that plague you in your life. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you right here next time on Lifeline for Daily Living.